Good afternoon, CEO. Good afternoon, Michael. Good afternoon, Valen.
Afternoon, everyone. Good to see you.
Likewise, CEO. Yeah, good afternoon, colleagues. Yeah, I can see two of our presenters are here. CEO, noting that we are 1 minute over two. I don't know if we're still expecting other people to join in, or we can just kick off a session. CEO?
Hi, everyone. I think because our speakers are here, we can start. People will be joining in as we go. I'm sure people are currently starting to join in, but yeah, we can start with the introductions. And as we now go to the speakers, I'm sure people will now be joining in. Thank you.
Okay, no, thanks, CEO. And good afternoon once again, colleagues. Yeah, my name is Lebogang Matswane. I am the project director for climate preparedness under the Climate Disaster International Foundation. I've been given the responsibility to take everyone through or to moderate these sessions for us. We anticipate the session to last not more than 1 hour, 30 minutes. And we hope and pray that we will adhere to the time slot. I mean, the Saturday, so they're anticipating that quite a lot of people have plans after this session. Yeah, without wasting any time, can I kick off the session with a brief introduction to our colleagues on the call? I think I'll have, by the order of what I'm seeing on my screen, I'll probably have the CEO, Michael, as well as Fallen, in that order. CEO, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lebo, our moderator for today, and greetings everyone and our speakers. So allow me to just introduce our organization before our projector go deep into it. So, like our project director said, my name is Robert Fatso, and I'm one of the founders for Climate Disasters International Foundation. So, essentially, what we do is we tackle climate change, and our major focus is on disaster management. And so, with our initiatives, I can just summarize it to 2 PPs and 2 RR. And the first P speaks to prevention. So we aim to prevent disasters. So that speaks to the advocates to move to renewable energy and to eliminate greenhouse gases. And the other P speaks to preparedness. So that is form part of this workshop where we aim to prepare the communities in a case that a disaster happens. And so with the first 2 Ps, we are more focused on education and awareness, and this forms part of the education and awareness. And we also do capacity building, skills training, police advocates, and also ecosystem restoration. And with the last piece, it speaks to responding to disasters. And then the last one is helping communities recover. So in a nutshell, that is our areas of focus. And we are particularly based in Cape Town. Maybe so we are focusing on 5 communities that include Masipili and Kalij and also other communities. So for the sake of time, I will not really dive deep, but I'm sure you get to know what we do if you are following us on social media. So we urge everyone that are here. I'm seeing a lot of new faces that are not part of our organization. So thank you guys for joining in. And yeah, looking forward to a productive session. Over to you, Project Director.
Okay. No, thank you very much, CEO. Yeah, colleagues, of course, as you might all be aware that this is our climate change webinar under the theme 5 years to go, strategies of achieving SDG 13, climate action by 2030 in Southern Africa. So I think for those that do not have a background of what the SDG 13 is, though I know both our presenters will touch more in detail into that. And SDG 13, I mean, is also called the climate action. It's a United States or the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, which is focused on taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. Like I indicated, that most of our work, just like the director said, the CEO said, most of our work focuses around that. But of course, it's important to drill down and probably investigate what the work or rather the purpose of this session will be. So we are looking at the 5 purposes and objective, which of course at the end of the session we are hoping that we would have achieved through the guidance of our keynote speakers. One is around assessing the progress on SDG 13 in Southern Africa. Of course, this will just provide an evidence-based update on how Southern African countries are performing with regard to the SDG 13. I mean, that includes the emissions reduction, resilience building, policy framework and the likes. The second one is to explore scalable strategies and best practices, which will mainly include highlighting successful interventions and programs from the Southern African region. Thirdly, we would like to foster cross-sectional collaborations, trying to find ways that we can collaborate, the organization can collaborate with the government, NGOs, academias, and researchers, private sectors, as well as the youth and indigenous communities. And fourthly, we would like to build political and public will for urgent action for all our disasters that we are experiencing both in South Africa and across the Southern African region. And by so doing, we will be following the process of reinforcing the shrinking window for action. I mean, it's only 5 years to go, or 5 years remaining to make a transformational progress before 2030. And of course, we need to inspire agency by linking climate action to present regional realities through drought, cyclones. Of course, we don't have much of cyclones in the region, but of course, in an event where such happen, we need to be ready. Hence, this webinar is hosted under disaster preparedness. And lastly, we need to generate tangible commitments and next step. So of course, the responsibility for you guys will be mainly to be motivated enough to commit a specific action at national, organizational, or community level. So having said that, I think I would introduce our first speaker, which is Mr. Michael in this case, to actually try and get to know him better. I understand that Mr. Michael, has a lot of capacity in terms of environmental issues. So, Mr. Michael Emmanuel Mutseyekwa is environmental and agricultural scientist with over 10 years of professional experience in disaster preparedness, sustainable agriculture, and environmental stewardship. As the Disaster Preparedness Project Lead at the Climate Disaster International Foundation, he drives strategic initiatives that align climate action with the community resilience, particularly through the lens of SDG 13 and 11. Mr. Michael holds a master's degree in environmental science with a research focus on the waste water treatment innovation, and he has published quite a number of articles in water science and technology. With a proven track record in stakeholder engagement, training facilitation, and climate smart programming, he brings a practical research-informed voice to the dialogue on flood preparedness and sustainable development. So that is Mr. Michael for us. I don't know if Mr. Michael would like to put your video on so that the colleagues on the ground can, our participant can put the face behind the voice.
Right.
Yeah, that's Mr. Michael for us.
Hello,
Mr.
guys.
Michael. Yeah, we can hear you, Mr. Michael. Can you hear us?
Okay, and you can see my video.
Yes, I can.
All right.
Yeah, Mr. Michael with a beautiful smile. Thank you, Mr. Michael. And maybe before I introduce the other speaker, while he's putting his video up, Mr. Fidelis Udo, or rather Dr. Fidelis Udo, which is the social scientist as well and a researcher whose work focuses on climate change, adaptation in urban and peri-urban areas across Africa. His research explores key themes such as climate displacement, urban diversification, and sustainability, with a strong emphasis on community-based approaches. He has led several projects addressing climate resilience, social diversity, and the evolving dynamics of peri-urban settlement. Currently, Dr. Fidelis is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Max Planck Institute in Göttingen, which is in Germany. His postural work investigates emerging patterns on climate-induced replacement and the transformation of peri-urban spaces in South Africa. He earned his PhD in political science from the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa in the year 2021. Colleagues, without wasting any time, can I give the honors to our first speaker, Mr. Michael Manuel, to take us through his first presentation. Over to you, Mr. Michael. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, guys. If you'll allow me, I want to share my screen so that I can use my presentation PowerPoint as I explain. I hope everyone is well and is ready to talk about climate change and the sustainability goals. Okay, my name is Michael Mutseyekwa, as my director said, and I am the environmental science expert, specifically responsible for disaster preparedness, and I'm with the organization Climate Disaster International Foundation. I think the CEO has talked well about what our organization is involved in. And so today, I just want to unpack how some simple, cost-effective preparedness measures can break the cycle of loss and also tie our actions with the global targets of the Sustainability Development Goals. By the end of this session, you will have a clear roadmap for understanding how we can deal with the risk of flooding to improve our resilience of our communities. And we'll give you some steps on how to improve your community, which you can take right now. So let's start by analyzing the scale of the problem first. I'm going to talk about flooding. Now, flooding is a very important phenomenon when you talk about disasters, because it is the most frequent of all the disasters that occur in human communities. In the illustration I put, it is a diagram which tries to show the number of floods that have occurred worldwide in different regions across the world. So as you can see, almost every region within the world has experienced some form of flooding. And some have experienced with flooding with the frequency of up to 222 during that period of 30 years. And flooding accounts for about 40% of all natural disasters. And on average, it displaces about 30 million people every year. And so from these statistics, you can tell that flooding is a very important phenomenon we need to discuss. It affects a lot of people's lives, and it affects each and every region that we are in. So it is something which we need to be prepared for. And I'm going to describe some of the costs that come with flooding as a natural disaster, starting with economic costs. There's destruction of infrastructure.
Sorry, expert. It seems like the slides are not moving.
They're not moving.
Yeah, they are not moving. We're still seeing the first slide, which talks
Okay.
to the result of flood preparedness. Yeah.
Let me try and fix that. Are you seeing the economic cost now?
It's still coming. Yes, definitely, sir. Thanks.
Okay. So I was saying that flooding is not just a lot of rain which causes discomfort and inconvenience, it has economic costs. It damages infrastructure, it damages bridges, roads, power lines, and it also has an impact on agricultural produce like livestock and crops and irrigation systems. And also the processes of response and recovery to flooding also demands economic cost as well. And so, as you can see, it is a significant one. The image that I've showed here is from the recent flooding that occurred in the eastern parts of South Africa. And you can see the extent of damage in just one small area which was affected by flooding. Now, in 2023, the UN estimated that about 80 billion US dollars was lost due to flooding. And African Development Bank estimates that since 2000, $520 billion worth of damage has been caused by flooding in Africa. And so you can see that it's not really just a small issue. It's a very significant issue which affects people's lives and incomes. I'll move on to the human costs that are associated with flooding. Now, in severe flooding, you have loss of life and injury. And there's also an increase in waterborne diseases like cholera and dysentery. This is due to the destruction of our normal sanitary systems and also displacement of people. They end up living in conditions which favor the spread of such diseases. And it also has effects on people's mental health as well. The trauma itself of being part of a flooding event, the anxiety which comes with trying to figure out what's going to happen in your future, and also the grief that comes with losing your loved ones and so on. And 75% of these deaths occur in low-income countries. That's a statistic by the WHO. And if I think we all remember the flooding that occurred in Zimbabwe in 2019 when Cyclone Eli hit part of Chimanimani. And subsequently, there were about 2,000 cases of cholera. This shows that flooding does not only cause an impact when it occurs, but also in the aftermath. And there's also a social disruption aspect that comes with flooding. With the destruction of homes and destruction of infrastructure, many people are forced to move to different locations. And this displacement and homelessness will definitely affect people's lives. There's disruption of schooling and healthcare services. So kids won't be able to go to school, sometimes for even indefinite periods of time. There will be no access to healthcare services. Pregnant women who need prenatal services might not have access to their usual healthcare services due to the damages of flooding. And also, even the social networks and livelihoods, they're going to be affected by flooding. And so many areas of human life are affected by flooding. It is a very significant disaster, and the fact that it is the most frequent makes it even more damaging. And now I'm going to try and link this phenomenon with another phenomenon known as climate change. As we all know, due to human economic activities, there has been changes in our climate, particularly a rise in the average global temperatures. And I'm going to try and explain how this can lead to an increase in frequency and intensity of flooding. And so generally, when temperatures increase, there is more evaporation of water from the Earth's surface. which lead to heavier rain and more frequent rain. This will also have a knock-on effect on water bodies like the seas and the rivers, which cause them to burst their banks and flood the land which is adjacent to them. And so the diagram that I've put on the screen shows that since 1950, up until 2000s, there has been a constant increase in the number of flooding events that have occurred in all the continents around the world. And I would like to emphasize that I'm not saying this increase in flooding can only be attributed to climate change. There are other factors that may cause the increase in flooding events, like the population settlements and also urban migration. However, climate change has also been at its highest during this period of time. And as I described earlier, that there's a direct link between the climate and the levels of rain and flooding. And so I've written a few examples there. In 2002, Pakistan monsoons submerged almost 1/3 of the country. And last year, the last rainy season in Harare, the levels of rain overwhelmed the drainage systems that were in the city. And we all know the levels of flooding that occurred there. And so we're seeing a gradual increase in the rainfall that we're receiving annually. And this is causing more frequent flooding and also flooding at higher intensity, which causes more damage, more economic, social, and human costs. Now, I'm going to now talk about disaster preparedness, specifically flood preparedness, and why it pays off for a community to make sure it has measures to prepare for such floods. Obviously, you're going to have a reduction in the lives and the property that is lost when the flood occurs. If you're prepared, you're definitely going to suffer less losses than a community which is not prepared. And preparedness is far more cost effective than disaster response and disaster recovery. Because when you're doing preparedness, you are only putting in measures to prevent destruction of property. But when you do recovery and response now, the property has already been damaged. Human life has already been lost, and human have already had injuries. So the cost, financial, economic, is higher than in preparedness. So it is better to be prepared than to wait for the disaster to occur and then remedy it. And you're going to keep certain services functioning, even in the cases of the disaster, like your schools, your shops, and hospitals. They will continue to function because of preparedness. And sorry, let me go back. There are certain measures that have been shown to be effective when it comes to flooding. In development, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to learn from what other communities have done, which has paid off, and then also implement it locally. So there are what are called early warning systems. These are systems put in place to warn people about the imminent flooding of an increase in the flooding threat. These can include some loudspeakers placed in a community, can include radio broadcasts warning people about the dangers of flooding, can include mass SMSs and also social media alerts to people in the community. When people are warned of the increased risk of flooding, they have a chance to prepare. They have a chance to maybe escape, go to higher ground or a ground less likely to flood. And they also have a chance to protect their property and their livestock. There's also flood resilient infrastructure. This is where a community designs its infrastructure in such a way that even when the flood comes, the damage to the property is minimal. And I gave an example of raised homes in Nepal. They have designed their houses in such a way that they are raised from the ground. And so when flooding does occur, the flood does not reach the levels of the home floor. And also there are nature-based solutions like wetland buffers, which can buffer the heavy flow of water when the flooding does occur. And there's also the aspect of training the community, educating them on what to do in the case of flooding occurring. Because most of the loss, particularly the human loss, is a result of people not responding in the proper way. They have no escape routes. They have no packages they've prepared to sustain them when they leave their homes. There was no early warning, and so the most of life can be actually prevented by educating people and carrying out drills to prepare them for when the event occurs. Now, how does preparedness link to sustainability and resilience of the community? Preparedness, particularly for an event like flooding, it builds the long-term capacity of a community. If you can see the diagram that I put, it shows all of the benefits that you can get from just from being prepared for a disaster. You increase the collaboration between stakeholders, you empower the people, you increase social connections, you also improve communication channels and understanding between people, and you increase social cohesion. Because most development efforts that have been effective, not only in disaster preparedness, but in any area, are those that have included the community itself and you involve them in every step of the way. So through encouraging preparedness of the community, you're also going to increase the social cohesion and strengthen the social systems. And like my director said, our main focus is to try and contribute towards the sustainable development goals. And through flooding preparation, we can actually contribute towards SDG 11 and SDG 13. SDG 11 talks of reducing the impact of disasters on the poor and vulnerable. And if we put in preparedness measures, we are actually directly reducing the impact of disasters when they do occur, particularly in the poor and vulnerable. And SDG 13, which talks of strengthening the resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards. As you know, preparedness definitely strengthens your community's resilience, because when the disaster does occur, the losses are reduced. And so, as you can see, the link between preparedness and the SDGs 11 and 13 is direct. And by adopting preparedness measures in our own communities, we are actually moving closer to achieving the SDGs, particularly SDG 11 and 13. And so let us talk about how we can implement disaster preparedness at a local level. As an individual, one way is to keep an emergency kit in your home. The illustration shows some common items that would be helpful in a emergency kit. You need your first aid kit, a mobile source of lighting, canned food or dried food, prepared food, utensils to use, and other light sources like candles and water, fresh water, because sometimes in the case of flooding, your freshwater sources are destroyed or covered. So if you have such a kit, when the disaster does come, you are prepared to immediately evacuate, and you won't suffer from the aftermath of the disaster. You have your basics with you wherever you go. And as a community, you could map those areas which you know that are prone to heavy flooding. And then you run quarterly drills. These drills are like a mock activities where the community is instructed to behave as if flooding is occurring. This helps people to internalize what they have to do when the actual flooding does occur. And so you're teaching people to because usually when the disaster occurs, a person is panicking, they have anxiety, and they're in shock. And so sometimes they may fail to actually do some basic things or escape when escape is possible. However, when it is an internalized process, which you have drilled over and over again, it becomes sort of second nature, and you are going to save more human lives that way. And as a community, I know most communities today have WhatsApp groups where they talk about issues happening in the community. These can also be utilized to share alerts for incoming disasters like flooding. And so you can use these groups as a way to broadcast information. And also as a community, you can engage with partners that are involved in disaster management. These partners can assist you to prepare certain measures in case of the flooding. CDIF is one organization which is involved in such activities. And I think at the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you some contact details. If you are interested in connecting your community with CDIF so that we can share with you some methods which you can use to prepare for disasters. There are also organizations like the Red Cross Society, Red Cross and Crescent. There are also local meteorological services and the municipal planning departments. This can also help you to prepare for these disasters. And so as I come to the end of my presentation, I would just like to ask everyone here to at least commit to one measure of preparedness this month. When after this webinar, you can actually start to create your own emergency kit, or you can start engaging community leaders for disaster preparedness. And this is an ongoing effort. You don't have to do it at once. If you do one item at a time, you get to a point where you become ready for anything that comes. You can please also connect with CDIF or any local agency so that you can receive training. Drills and local education and training are only effective if they are the right ones. I know we're living in an age of a lot of misinformation and disinformation. You might actually waste a lot of resources and time trying to establish preparedness measures which are not effective when the time comes. And also share this knowledge with other people who are not in this webinar. If you have friends and family in other communities, talk to them about flood resilience and share this knowledge. You never know how many lives you might save just by doing that. And so I've come to the end of my presentation, and I think I'll hand over the time back to the moderator for, I don't know, for the next step. Here are some of the details of Climate Disaster International Foundation, and I'm going to post them again later when requested, so that you can actually write them down and take note of them. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you very much, Environmental Expert. Quite an informative presentation there. And I think from my side, what really caught my interest is really the true cost of floods in our regions. I mean, in most cases, due to inflation and the current financial status of most countries, I sometimes believe that the cost of these disasters sometimes, or to a larger degree, underestimated. I mean, we learned recently that in Eastern Cape, on its own, the disaster there was worth around 5.1 billion. And due to the ongoing process of having various stakeholders contributing towards the preparedness, and also the ongoing rains that are experienced in the region, it's anticipated that the cost will probably go up. Yeah, but having said that, thank you very much, expert. I think colleagues, please, I know people are most likely I'm excited to be throw some questions, but can I request that we hold on to the questions or that are typing on the chat box? And of course, we will engage thoroughly with them after our next speaker, which is Dr. Fidelis Udo. Dr. Fidelis will be giving us the next presentation on climate displacement and sustainability strategies in Southern Africa. Over to you, Dr. Udo. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Abraham. And thank you so much to everyone here in the event. And also special thanks to the first speaker. Quite interesting. And it has really opened my mind. Let me share my screen. Window. Okay. All right. So I was saying that the presentation from the first speaker has really opened my mind to a lot of things, especially the practical aspect of disaster management, and it has also opened my mind to the need to combine theory and practice in combating climate change adaptation. And I want to say that I will come more from a very social scientific perspective. And when I received this call to be here, I wasn't quite sure what to prepare. But then I think the spirit will lead. Yes. So my name is Fidel Isudo, as the CEO introduced. I'm a social scientist, and I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at the Max Planck Institute in Germany. And my research mainly focuses on climate change adaptation. So today the topic of my presentation is climate displacement and sustainability strategies in Southern Africa, as I was instructed by the CEO. So I'm a very obedient fellow, and I had to really stick to the topic. Though the CEO also gave me some subtopics to dwell on. I would say I've been a little bit disobedient in that aspect, but I will still, my discussion will still try to stick to the points that the CEO gave me to discuss on, which was mainly around to articulate the extent of climate-induced displacement in Southern Africa, and also to talk about rural and urban vulnerabilities and adaptation, and also sustainability strategies, and then finally issues of sustainable governance. And I think these issues really align with the theme of this event, which is 5 years to go, strategies for achieving SDG 13, climate action by 2030. So firstly, just like I said, I'm coming from a very theoretical and academic perspective. And I think it will be interesting for us to, those who are in the field and those of us who are in the academia, we bring theory and practice together. And I think that will really help to provoke a very constructive and critical discussion. So first, when we talk about global migration, we understand that global migration is driven by a myriad of complex factors, not just environmental factors, environmental or climatic factors. So when people move from one place to another, there are a lot of more factors that combines to shape or to influence people's movement. And those are political, could be political factors, could be political tomorrow. For instance, in the case of South Sudan, it could be economic. People move to go and search for jobs, you know. And behind this economic movement, it could be that their source of livelihood have been tampered on, right? And it could be that there have been floods, that there have been droughts, and other climatic disasters that have tampered with people's sources of. So that is how all these different factors combine with environmental factors to shape why people move from place to place, or why people migrate. And okay, I hope everybody can see my screen, right? Just need to be sure. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, yeah. So currently this actually one of the research that actually spur academic discourse on climate displacement was this World Bank report that was published in 2018. It was 10 Groundswell reports. And Groundswell report predicted that by 2050, if there is no concrete climate and development action, climate change could lead to could displace more than 260 million people across different regions of the world. And that was that was such a shocking prediction, right? And our focus here is, you can see Sub-Saharan Africa has the largest share of displacement, right? And that is because of our low adaptive capacity, poverty, and a lot of other factors that have really exposed sub-Saharan Africa to the impacts of climatic disasters. So, sometimes we do not need to take this prediction at face value. Sometimes they are quite futile. And why so? Because there are different factors. It is quite difficult to predict how many people will move or will not move, because whether people move or not move is shaped by a lot of sociocultural and environmental factors. So it's not just environmental factors. There are other forms of sociocultural factors that determine whether people move in the face of disaster or decide to stay, which during our discussion, we'll get to know some of those sociocultural and economic factors. So, when I saw the topic, the three concepts that came to mind was first the concept of displacement, right? And I looked it up, and displacement means the situation in which people are forced to leave the place where they normally live. They are forced, the word forced, they are forced to leave the place where they normally live. Can also mean when people are forced to leave the place where to leave their job. That is a repetition. And so that is displacement, and displacement here is quite different. That is why we say displacement is a loaded term, because when we say people are displaced, we also forget the fact that people can also voluntarily decide to stay in place or to adapt within place. They can decide not to move, and a lot of other factors also determine whether people move or not, right? And displacement here talks about more of involuntary kind of, when people are left without any agency to decide whether to move or not. And we talk about sustainability. So sustainability here is the capacity to maintain or improve the state and availability of desirable materials or condition over a long time. And the United Nations Brundtland Commission in 1987 defined sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So how do we adapt to climate change or to disasters so that we meet the needs of the present, but without jeopardizing the future generations? I think that is what sustainability is about. And then we talk about sustainable development goals, and those are the frameworks for improving the lives of populations around the world and mitigating the hazardous impact of man-made and also natural effects of climate change. And you see, today we talk of global actions on climate change, the global community trying to intervene, UN frameworks to combat climate change. There are different frameworks from different angles and different global actions that seek to combat climate change. And say today, almost 140 countries, mostly developing countries in the world, are seeking ways of meeting their own development needs, but at the same time, preventing the jeopardization of future needs, especially in the face of increasing threats of climate change and poverty in developing nations. And I think that is where the SDG 13 comes in, climate actions, which calls for integrating different measures to prevent climate change to prevent climate change within the defined development frameworks. And then Southern Africa in focus, first we saw that shocking image of prediction, and with South Africa being at the tail end of the recipient of disaster impact. But our focus here is actually on Southern Africa. And in the Southern African region, the worsening climate conditions has exacerbated poverty and disrupt livelihood, prompting both internal and cross-border migration. And my work has really focused on countries around South Africa. I focus on Mozambique, Malawi, and South Africa. And from my experience of migration within these regions, I can see that South Africa seems to be an attractive destination for many climate migrants around the region, right? And that is because of the strength of South African economy compared to other countries within the Southern African region. And reports by Stats SA on Migration Report in 2023 actually showed that many migration within the region has South Africa as destinations. And what happens when this happens is that when people move, maybe within the country or across the border, for instance, they will move first to maybe cities, and from cities, when life becomes quite difficult in cities, then they tend to move towards the margins of the cities. And that is also one of the findings I had through my research. So around the Southern African region, mostly people moving across border from Mozambique, from Malawi, from Zimbabwe, and even beyond the border countries, mainly comprise, Black African migrants. And that also shows the complexity and the diverse nature, of this, and also climate impact is also quite differential.
Sorry,
right?
Doc. Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, Doc. I don't know if you are moving your slide because we are still,
Yes,
we are still on the
moving.
first slide from our end.
I'm moving. I don't know why it's not moving.
Yeah. Now we are at the in focus. Yeah.
Okay. I won't put it in slideshare again. Maybe that was the reason. So climate impact is always quite differential across race, across gender, across other various demographics. For instance, the impacts, that maybe Black African women experience of climate change might be different from the impact that a white woman maybe living in urban center, maybe in Europe, experience. So climate change usually impacts people differently depending on their socioeconomic and demographic factors. And also for internal migration within South Africa, as I said, key urban centers in Gauteng and Western Cape are usually, the first destination of migrants. And these are mainly maybe Johannesburg and Cape Town metros, And what happens when we talk of sustainability, when people start moving, maybe because of various issues of socioeconomic job loss, desertification, loss of livelihoods. Maybe farmers are no more able to farm in rural areas, and now they are moving towards the urban centers to search for jobs, right? So now what happens in the urban center when it becomes congested? So that is also one of the prevailing discussion in sustainability. What happens to urban centers? So presently, urban centers within African cities, within African countries, Southern African nation is becoming more and more congested, is becoming more and more overcrowded. For instance, when you go to Johannesburg, you see how congested it is and how life becomes quite more expensive by day. And when this happens, what happens? People begin to move towards the margins. For instance, people in Johannesburg will now begin to move towards peri-urban areas, the peripheries of the cosmopolitan cities, maybe Katlehong and other areas. So now that has been the pattern of movement, right? And from my experience, I also worked in Limpopo, and the record has shown that Limpopo, Northern Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal province experienced the highest number of internal out migration. And this was reported, between 2011 and 2022, right? So what does this entail? These areas have, for instance, Limpopo has a lot of farming activities going on there. So what happens when people's livelihood or farming activities are no more yielding? So they will now need to migrate. They are displaced, and they will now need to move either to the city center. Some move directly to the city center. And when life becomes difficult at the city center, then they now move towards the margins where maybe utilities are quite cheap. Water, electricity, and housing are quite cheap. So so this caused some continuous diversification first within urban centers and then diversification in peri-urban settlements. And this has also presented a lot of sustainability issues, not only in urban centers, but also within these peri-urban settlements. And as we go on, maybe I will touch on some of these sustainability issues. Yeah, so over the years, I've conducted various research across these countries I've mentioned, and my research mainly focused on patterns of climate-related displacement and diversification, as I've said, and peri-urbanization in the context of the changing climates. And I've worked in KwaZulu-Natal province in townships like Umlazi, Tongat, Kwamashu, and others. Then Gauteng province, I've done research in Alexandria and mainly Katlehong, done a lot of research in Katlehong. I've also done some research in Limpopo province, Zanin. I've done research in peri-urban settlements in Mozambique, mainly around Mafala, Masakane, Madola, and all those peri-urban settlements, mainly bordering South Africa, So my aim was to check the patterns of cross-border migration around those trans-frontier communities. Also in Malawi, we can, most especially southern Malawi, and we can remember the cyclone of Cyclone Idai, the famous Cyclone Idai and Cyclone Freddy that actually displaced thousands of people, and also not only displaced, killed. It was reported that that cyclone killed about 5,000 people, and it affected part of southern Malawi and part of Mozambique. So it killed up to 5,000 people. So that was one of the most disastrous climate change impacts that really affected Southern Africa, and that caused a huge number of displacement, and mostly towards Southern Africa. So in my research, I usually apply mainly qualitative methods, including ethnographic observations. I interview community members, use in-depth, semi-structured, in-depth interview method to interview community members and also key informants, including local municipal, local councillors, municipal executives, NGOs that deal with climate change. And participants usually include both internal, international, and cross-border migrant. And across these, I usually seek to understand, as I said, the climate-related migration trajectories and mobility patterns, and also evolving diversifications in peri-urban settlements across Southern Africa. Yeah, so, but now I just want to pick a few contexts, maybe just to, because across these different regions that I've mentioned, there are a lot of similar displacement patterns that I've observed, but I want to pick a few cases in context, maybe just to give us a brief overview of the kind of displacement issues happening within these regions. So for instance, in Umlazi, Umlazi is the largest township and peri-urban settlement in KwaZulu-Natal. So it comprises both formal and informal settlements, and is the third largest township in South Africa. And Umlazi is rapidly diversifying recently across ethnic, linguistic, cultural, occupational, and national backgrounds. And these are caused by both internal and cross-border migrants, and also international migrants. And also evolving infrastructure and economic activities in this township continue to attract diverse populations. And in the context of South African post-apartheid development trajectories, so the government is really putting effort to really attract investment and development in the previously disadvantaged communities and townships, And Umlazi happened to be one of those kind of townships that government is really putting effort at attracting investment. So what happened? This also, attract some climate displaced persons who will now move towards these townships to look for opportunities after their livelihood have been affected, maybe in different rural areas. And in Umlazi, I came across many internal migrants from various provinces, particularly mainly Eastern Cape. And there were also migrants from the surrounding locations, including Ulundi, Zululand, and also cross-border migrants, predominantly from Zimbabwe and Mozambique and Malawi. And previous presenters stated, some of the recent climatic issues that have really affected these countries. And also migrants from Ethiopian, Somalis, and Burundians, and recently more migrants from various demographics are also trooping into these townships, right? And when this happens, most of these migrants, are internally and externally displaced persons as a result of climate impacts. Yeah, I wouldn't really go into much details, but then you realize that what happens is many households and individuals, primarily women-headed households, are usually severely affected by the impacts of continuous climate change. And Umlazi over the years has experienced a lot of flooding in 2019. In 2022 and in 2023. 2023. There were severe floodings in this township in these various years, and that those disasters poses a lot of disastrous impacts for both residents within these communities and also migrants who have already been displaced from their various locations in these areas. And during my interaction, many interviewees expressed a deep attachment to the township. I mean, for instance, many people who have lived in this township for so many years express that they would, I mean, amidst, no matter how the disaster is, they wouldn't want to move. And this is also another form of displacement, trapped, right? Because disaster doesn't always mean people move. People can also decide to stay, and there are various factors that can influence whether people stay in place and or decide to move. And one of those factors could be economic. For people to be able to migrate or move, they need to have money. And if they don't have money, then they have been trapped in place, right? Then other people can also decide to stay because they've stayed in that township for a very long time. So they have developed a sense of attachment to that township, right? Maybe they have their ancestral roots in those township and they wouldn't want to move. So those are also forms of displacement, diversification, and also, yeah, forms of issues that are also caused by climate change. And that is why I said the prediction by World Bank was quite futile, because it is not only environmental factors that determine whether people move, there are also socioeconomic and sociocultural factors. So it's quite difficult to really predict how many people move, you know, if all these factors are not put into consideration. Yeah, so a lot of all those factors, and also another factor that also ensue in this kind of township is, you know, issues of gentrification, issues of spatial inequality in people from urban centers, for instance, from Durban Central, who have experienced maybe or who want to experience maybe lower rent or low utility, will now want to migrate towards the periphery, like Umlazi. And they will, for instance, maybe middle class people who want to move from urban centers, they will move to Umlazi. So when they move to Umlazi, remember that even within Umlazi, and when floods happen, it doesn't affect all the areas. So there is also that spatial inequality in that when these people move in, they build maybe good infrastructures. And this also create newer tensions, newer vulnerabilities, newer risk, newer sense of identity in people, or sense of not feeling belonging. So all these are some of the issues that also that are also influenced by climate change movement. Yeah, and in Umlazi, I also experienced that some young and elderly people who were working as laborers in factories, you know, some of them had the desire to move elsewhere in the face of disaster, but was hampered by fear of securing employment. For instance, those who have already had their houses maybe in these areas, if flood happens, you know, how do they move to go and start life afresh from a new place? So those fear also causes what we call trapped, you know, people feel trapped in place because, you know, they don't have the socioeconomic impetus to move. So all those are issues that also arose. And also in This is not Umlazi, but this is Malawi, actually. I intended to say Malawi. So I also did some work in southern Malawi, in these communities, Kolosa community, in the Rande community, Manja and Chilobwe. And these are the communities that were severely affected by the cyclone. For instance, one of those cyclones in March 2023, Cyclone Freddy, actually displaced millions of people in this region of Malawi. Right. And I have some pictures that I will show you, some of the environmental conditions, And, just like my previous presenter said, it also leads to other factors like diseases, cholera, malaria outbreak, which keeps killing, people, especially those who were trapped in this region, who were not able to move as a result of not having the financial means to move to other places. And it also instilled a sense of trauma. During my focus group discussions, many people expressed trauma that because of the severity of this cyclone, whenever they sleep or whenever there is a little thunder, they feel that inner fear. They feel like, oh, maybe that has come again. Maybe cyclone may happen again. So those people are trapped, and the government might not, maybe during cyclone, there will be an emergency intervention. But after that, government might not really have any sustainable plan in place for the future of these people, So government around this region will just intervene during that disaster, and after that, everything is finished. And that also speaks to issues of lack of good governance, lack of sustainable governance, and also lack of participatory governance, not going to the people and asking them, like, what are your fears, what are your needs, what are your, what have you been experiencing? Because that is also what what government seeks to do in order to carry people along in governance. So also fear of uncertainty, just like I experienced in other locations. And some of these residents also live on remittances, because some of them have relatives who are maybe in South Africa are working, and maybe they live on those kind of remittances. That is what they survive on. And so it was in Malawi that I first heard of the concept of peace job. Like when I asked people, like, what do you do? I'm doing peace job in South Africa, and I got to understand that, peace job actually means like wage, manual labor. Yeah, so those were some of the issues that arose from my experience of this community, and also issues of identity. I came across a particular section of the community who were actually reluctant to move, and they're reluctant to move because they said they had their ancestors buried within the community. So despite that, the government, the local government actually got a court order to evict them, but still they weren't ready and willing to move. And all those are some of the issues that also arise, when, in issues of climate displacement. Yeah, I wouldn't, and you could see these are some of the pictures of the impacts of climate change disasters. This is impacts of floods in Umlazi. This was in Tongat. I visited Tongat in July 2024, and we remember the tornado that hit Tongat in June 2023. So that was a very disastrous impact though tornado might not so it might not readily be attributed to climate change, but it also has some very close relationship to climate change, because scientists have also shown that tornado is also as a result of natural climatic factors. So this was impact of tornado in Tonga. And these were the makeshift shelters that were made for those who were displaced, just for emergency interventions. And these were not really sustainable. And another unsustainable approach to governance was that people who took refuge in these shelters, you could see that different genders, both men, women, and children, had to stay together. So that was very difficult for these people, especially women. And that also posed another gender aspect to vulnerability of these members. Also, one of the aspects that government or governance also need, or interventions, or also need to consider when addressing climatic impacts. This thing moving. Okay, so this was impact of Cyclone Freddy in Kolosa community in southern Malawi. So this is just a section of the area that was affected by the cyclone. This is just a snapshot. It affected almost the entire area and it displaced millions of people in southern the various cyclone Idai, Cyclone Freddy, and various cyclones that have affected that part. Displaced people from Malawi, from Mozambique, and that was a huge impact. This was communities trying to rebuild in Colossal community, houses that were destroyed. And most of this rebuilding, were from remittances from relatives and friends in South Africa. And above all, what are the patterns? What can we make of the patterns of these disasters? So first, we talk of disaster types. There are slow onset disasters such as droughts. It takes time to develop, and people can also plan. Put plans in place to move. People can start moving in their mind before they actually, save money to move. In the case of drought, desertification, those kind of disasters come slowly. And there are rapid onset disasters such as flash floods and cyclones, and that will require evacuation. That will require emergency relocation of almost the entire community, right? So it's also important that governance also take into consideration the different types of disasters when addressing climate change governance. And also spatiality of movement. Now it's not only about rural urban migration as traditional climate change literature says, but now there is more of a kind of cyclical. People could move from rural to urban area. From urban, when lives become difficult, they will now move to peri-urban, to margins of the city centers. Some migration can take different spatial trajectories. It's not just rural to urban, and it take different temporal trajectories. Some move for long term, some move seasonally. Maybe they just move to go seek seasonal jobs. Some move for short term. And in all these cases, the cause is economic and livelihood impact. It impacts their economic and livelihood. And some of them want to diversify their livelihood strategies, and that is why they move. And what happens, when people move, so my project actually looks at what happens when people move from places to places. So when migrant meets with local, there's likely to be new forms of tensions between migrants and locals, new forms of inequalities, new forms of vulnerability, leading to a sense of exclusion, social hierarchies, sense of belonging and place. And also the changing dynamics and categories of differences, residents with varied status. So for instance, when climate change also causes people to become refugees, and when people become refugees, some of them are quite vulnerable because of their legal status, because some of them have not legalized their status. So it had another layer of vulnerability to this set of people. And I know I've already used up my time. The moderator is chasing me now. Yeah, so these are the different forms of vulnerabilities that we experience. This is spatial inequalities, social hierarchies, and sense of place. And maybe just to conclude, the concluding thought say climate displacement present newer patterns of diversifications, newer forms of vulnerabilities, and newer forms of risk when people move. And these have implications for present and future sustainability, both in rural, peri-urban, and urban areas, in Africa and in Southern Africa in particular. It also has implications for urban planning and also planning for infrastructure and also planning how to manage social cohesion, when different diverse forms of people move and mix together. How do you manage social cohesiveness and some form of subtle conflicts and tensions that arise? So all those speaks to issues of sustainability and what governance needs to put into consideration when addressing climate displacement. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for taking so long.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay, Doc. And thank you very, very much for the insightful session. Yeah, I have online, I have 3 questions for Mr. Michael, and I think for you as well, Doc, we have 3 questions. So the first question is around the policy and governance for Mr. Michael, which says, what are the most critical policy gaps preventing effective flood disaster preparedness in African countries, and how can government address them before 2030? That's the first one. The second one, what strategies have proven most effective in building flood resilience at the community level, especially among vulnerable groups, with special emphasis on women, children, in informal settlements? Then the third one, what role can early warning systems and digital tools play in strengthening preparedness, and how can we improve access in rural or under-connected areas? I don't know, Dr. Respect, if you managed to get those questions.
Can you repeat the second and the third question?
The second one says, so what strategies have proven most effective in building flood resilience at the community level, especially among vulnerable groups such as women, children, and informal settlements? Then the third one says, what role can early warning systems and digital tools play in strengthening preparedness, and how can we improve access to rural areas or underconnected areas? So while maybe you're jotting that down, I can also put out those for Dr. Phyllis. The first question is, how are national and regional policies in Southern Africa addressing the rights and protection of communities displaced by climate-related events such as droughts, floods, and cyclones. I think you might have touched on this on your, I think, second last slide, which talks to the impacts of displacement, to say when locals and people who are displaced come together, there tend to be a certain level of inequalities. But yeah, you'll talk much or deeper into that. Then the other one is around urbanization and planning. With increasing climate displacement leading to urban migration, how can cities in Southern Africa particularly plan for sustainable climate resilience, urban expansion that accommodate displaced populations? I think this is something that has been discussed worldwide, to say how do urbanization, how do we accommodate people who are displaced in urban areas? So that's the second question. The third question, what opportunities exist for Southern African countries to collaborate on cross-border climate displacement challenges, especially where migration is driven by shared environmental stressors? Yeah, finding people who are migrating from South Africa to other countries due to climate issues. So there's many talk to regional collaboration, particularly in the context of Southern Africa. Doc, I'm not sure if you managed to note all three questions before I open the floor for more questions.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so having said that, I will open the floor now to Mr. Michael, while our colleagues online are trying to, or they are taking their thoughts in the next questions. Yeah, Mr. Michael, over to you.
Okay. For the first question, the questioner asked, what are the most important policy gaps that are hampering disaster preparedness efforts? And I think there are quite a number of policy gaps which you can talk about. First of all, most governments don't have a clear coordination framework. And so it's very unclear that who's responsible for what and who does what. And so this creates a lot of duplication of efforts, especially during the crisis. And also the response itself is weakened because no one is really knows what they're supposed to be doing. And there's also insufficient risk assessments, I guess, or investment in early warning systems, because even though natural disasters like flooding, they are in the larger part, they are unpredictable and they can occur at any time. If you map areas that are prone to flooding, for example, and you create a risk assessment that is specific to each and every region, it will be much easier for you to allocate resources and to make plans which are specific and which are effective. But most governments do not have such risk assessments carried out. Their efforts for disaster preparedness are generalized. They might say we are allocating a certain amount of money for disaster management. However, the distribution of that those resources is not properly planned. And still talking about financial preparedness, there's also the issue of most governments work on a budget to budget level, and there is need to actually allocate funds before a disaster occurs, and most of the governments are not doing this. They rely too much on donor funding, which comes in after the disaster has already occurred. And that's the challenge with most governments. And you can also talk of community engagement as well. Things like disaster management, especially preparedness, have been shown to work more effectively when the community is involved. And most governments do not really take note of this. I noticed some developmental organizations do, but most governments usually work from the top down, telling the communities that we are responsible for the preparedness and we'll tell you what to do. However, that's really effective as well. And I don't know if I've answered that question, but there are also issues to do with infrastructure and monitoring and learning. So yeah, there are many gaps that can be talked about. I don't know if I have sufficiently answered that question.
Yeah. Unless there's a follow-up question coming from the floor, but from my end, you've sufficiently done that. Thanks.
In terms of the second question, they were asking about which disaster preparedness or flood preparedness measures have proven most effective, particularly for vulnerable groups. And I think number one would have to be the early warning systems, especially if those early warning systems are community-based. Like I said in the previous response, most actions are nationalized and they become less effective at a community level. But if you have early response systems, early warning systems, which are community-based, they are very effective. Like I talked about sirens and radio broadcasts, and I think in most African communities now, there are community radios which serve a specific community which is near them, and these have proven to be very effective particularly with the vulnerable groups, and also risk mapping as well. You can never downplay the importance of really mapping the risk associated with each region. And if it's inclusive, like I mentioned, and the members of the community themselves are involved in mapping the areas, then their awareness of the risk in each specific area is actually strong, and they are more likely to be prepared for any disaster which comes. And the preparedness kits, like I talked about, these can be customized. We are talking when you're talking about vulnerable groups, you can customize your emergency kits specifically for the needs of each vulnerable group. So if you have, for example, the visually impaired, they might need certain tools and appliances which might aid them in the evacuation. So that's another way you can also assist. And of course, like what most of the developmental agencies have been doing, you have social protection schemes like the cash transfer. If you know, WFP in Zimbabwe was using a cash transfer program where they were giving those affected by disasters a certain amount of cash monthly to help them sustain themselves in the cases when they are displaced or when they face destruction of their properties. So I think those are some of the areas which have proven effective, particularly when it comes to vulnerable groups and at community level. And if you may allow me, I will move to the third question. Can you please repeat the question just briefly? The third one. Your microphone is off, Chair.
Yeah, sorry. Let me just quickly go to it. Yeah. I think it's around.
Early warning system, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, what role can the early warning system and digital tools play in strengthening preparedness, and how can we improve access in rural or underconnected areas? Yeah, thanks.
Okay, yeah. So early warning systems, I could compare them to the nervous system of a body. They help to sense and also spread the message of any impending disaster that's going to come. And so they play a very important role. They can predict floods before they occur, giving authorities and members of the community time to actually take more robust preparation methods. And they are easy to, they use mediums such as radio broadcasts and SMS, like I said. And so information can be spread almost instantly. And therefore, the reduction in the time there's actually an increase in the time between when a person is warned and when the disaster occurs. And so they enable you to evacuate or prepare for the pending disaster as well. And they also protect livelihoods and infrastructure. We're talking about, for example, farmers. If they have their crops and their animals, they can make plans for them to put them in a safer place before the flooding occurs. And thus they would have protected their source of livelihood. And even after the disaster, they can continue going on with the livelihood which they were exercising also. And like I mentioned in the presentation, it has been proven that early warning systems can reduce flood-related losses by up to 75% if they're also linked with effective response plans. Remember, I talked about evacuation drills and so on. And so if people have early warning systems and they also know what to do when they receive the warning, then you can actually reduce the losses from floods by up to 75%. And so in the long term, you reduce the costs that is associated with the disaster. And so I think, yeah, that's what I can say about early warning systems. I think they're the key, but they're pivotal in any flood preparedness measures. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you with all respect. Yeah, I will await to see if you have digested it. But yeah, from my understanding, your responses were quite, or rather, very, very clear. Dr. Udo, I'll open the floor to you now, briefly, just to respond to the questions.
All right. Yeah. No. Thank you. These were very insightful question, and if I pick them very clearly. So question number one was, how are national and regional policies addressing displaced persons in Southern Africa? I mean, that is summarily what I got. So first, I want to state that when we say climate change is or environmental factors or climate change factors. I mean, if we want to come from international level, climate refugees are not recognized in the UN convention, which convention for refugees, human rights convention for refugees, which South Africa is a member of. So in that case, how does the UN define refugees? People who are displaced as a result of factors due to political violence, religious beliefs, and all those. So nowhere is, or maybe prejudice based on their gender and identity. Nowhere is it mentioned that refugees also include those that have been displaced by climate change. So it now become quite difficult to really spot climate refugees or those displaced by climate change that is within the international framework. And that is one of the discussions ongoing now that nations, the international community, where nations are part of, needs to recognize climate change as climate change refugees as part of because it's actually becoming a very big part of what displaces people. Then when it comes to the national level, right? Yeah, there are a few policies within the national level in South Africa and also some national levels that seeks to address the plight of displaced persons. But I would say that many of these policies are actually very theoretical in nature. I mean, South Africa has been long. We had the National Climate Change Adaptation Plan. I mean, it's a very long document that really state, what the climate change adaptation plans of South Africa are. Uh, it's called National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy. Is there in a policy document? There is National Adaptation Plan, and even climate change issues is also explicitly discussed in NDP Vision 2020-2030. And recently, last year, the Climate Change Act was passed, which also mentions climate change adaptation. So all these are some of the policies in place. But what we really need in action now is the implementation. And also, not just implementation, but more of a participatory but not just bottom up, but also not just top down, but also bottom up approach, to addressing these issues, because climate change adaptation is very contextual, is very local in nature. So it needs to start from the local and then goes up. It needs to start from the local, because it is actually the local government that really understands the need, the disaster needs of displaced persons. So I would say those policies are there, but we need more of adaptation and also intersectoral and interministerial and collaborations across all government levels to address this particular issue. Then the second one was, I will be very brief now. The second one was, in the face of urbanization, how can city plan for sustainable resilience and relocation of affected persons? So I would say, urbanization is Africa is the future of urbanization. And when we look at the issues of all these complexities of post-colonial, post-apartheid, city planning that also intersect with climate change to shape urbanization. So Africa is really the future of urbanization. And I mean, in the face of, this kind of urbanization, what do governments needs to do to really maybe diversify livelihoods, right? That is one of the strategies. Plan peri-urban areas. Now there is a lot of gentrification. People are now people are now moving towards the margins of the city centers. So there is need for government to look into urban peripheries, not just urban centers. So government needs to take development and infrastructure and facilities, not just concentrated within the city center, but also plan other peripheries so that it can also accommodate people in the face of the rapid urbanization. And then, yeah, that can also highly improve resilience of people who have been displaced. Then also the third one was opportunities for Southern African countries to collaborate with other countries in the region on climate change issues. I think there are various opportunities for this collaboration, but it really needs political will. First, there are many NGOs and organizations and charity organizations that that deal with climate change issues and plights of displaced persons, refugees, and which climate refugees and climate displaced persons are also part of these forms of organization. We have the IOM, which is just like the main international body that address the plights of refugee and displaced persons. And IOM also has a unit in South Africa. So these are then we have the COMSA. Then we also have African Climate and Mobility Initiative, which is also a very big body that seeks to collaborate, seeks to bring African countries and cities and local government together in order to address issues of climate change. So these organizations are especially within the region, but we need more of political will in the face of from the part of countries. And also, I would dare say that South Africa happens to be one of the countries that that really quite strong in addressing issues of climate change, and that also speaks to South Africa is also a powerful country within the region. Is like one of the most economically viable country within the region. And so I think South Africa also needs to take huge initiative in leading the region in climate change adaptation measures. Yeah, thank you. I don't know if I've been able to address. Yeah.
No, you have certainly, Doc. However, I'm getting into trouble with the CEO. We are 20 minutes after the time that was allocated for this session. Yeah, I think maybe just to check if there are any other questions coming from the floor for proposed closure. Going once, going twice. Okay, gone. All right. Yeah. Colleagues, thank you very, very much, Dr. Phyllis. Thank you very, very much for your insightful presentation. We really learned a lot from your presentation, Mr. Michael. Same applies to your end. Thank you very, very much for the insights that you have given us on this webinar. I would propose that probably if the CEO agrees, the presentation be shared with everyone who was on the session, just in case they want to piggyback or study it further. They're able to do so, but failure of which, of course, there is this recording that the colleagues can go back to and just go through what the session was about or the video was about. But having it said that, can I just take this time, colleagues, to propose closure and thank each and every person who has been part of this wonderful session and your patience thereof. Having it said that, can I propose closure and wish everyone a pleasant and a very warm Saturday afternoon. The session is adjourned, colleagues, and thank you very, very much for your patience. Thanks and bye.
Good day, everyone. Sorry. Okay, it's fine. I'll give that time to you.
Bye, everyone.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, you can come in. See, oh, sorry. Yeah, you can come in.
Oh, sorry. So sorry for that. So I missed your last point. So I wanted to check in if you have given time to me or it was just someone else.
Yes, you can just come in and give a overall sum up before we close. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So first and foremost, thank you all who have joined. It was good to see a number of people from outside who are not part of CDIF, and a huge appreciation to our speakers, Dr. Odo and Michael. It was very intense and very comprehensive, profound, insightful. I would also want to appreciate Dr. Udo as well because he's out of our organization and agreed to be part of this workshop. I just spoke to him like once and he was like, I'm coming in. So it was good to see the enthusiasm from people who are really doing very impactful works outside the world. So your presentation was very engaging and I'm sure when you post it on YouTube, more people are going to connect with it as well. I would want to thank you for taking your time on such a very busy Saturday weekend when you want to rest, but you chose to spend part of it with us. And to our moderator, project director label, I really want to thank you for the coordination job well done, and from people from CDRF, thank you so much for coming to support through. Look forward to more and more engagements and more workshop readiness to come in the future. So thank you so much, Tim, and go therefore into your communities and continue the resilience that you've gained from this workshop. So looking forward to see the fruits of it. This is just the beginning, and yes, cheers to more. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Yeah. In my culture, you can't say anything once your boss has spoken. But except to say goodbye, colleagues, and thank you very, very much. The session is adjourned. Bye.
Bye.